Kayla Hayes stood at the front of the massive conference room, her back straight, eyes locked on the holographic projection of the Galactic Council. The room was filled with the representatives of hundreds of species, some humanoid, others unrecognizable, their forms shifting, translucent, or hovering. But Kayla's attention was on one figure, Supreme Chancellor Zurian, his aged face draped in the calm yet cold expression of an alien who had seen millennia pass. His species, the Sindraki, had dominated the Galactic Council for centuries, and his words carried the weight of the galaxy itself. The moment felt surreal, like stepping into a stage play where every line had been written, yet she was the one holding the pen. She could hear the faint hum of the ship's engines outside, a reminder that they were suspended in deep space, far from Earth's grasp. The stakes here were as high as they could get. Captain Hayes, Zurian's voice echoed through the chamber, cutting through the low murmur of the council. His tone was measured, as though he'd already anticipated her response. The Galactic Council has offered humanity a place within our collective governance. A mutually beneficial agreement. Protection. Resources. A future free of war. This is no simple trade. It is an opportunity. I trust you understand the magnitude of this moment. Kayla swallowed hard. Her fingers itched for the datapad in front of her, a sleek device that would either seal humanity's fate or preserve their independence. She'd read the offer from the Council countless times, each word a reminder of the chains they would place around Earth's future. It was tempting, she would admit, but Kayla was no fool. The price of compliance was freedom, and she was not ready to trade that. Not yet. We're not interested, Chancellor, she said, her voice calm but unwavering. The words rang out through the sterile chamber, and for a brief moment, a collective breath seemed to hold. The silence was thick, stifling. Zurian's gaze hardened, his ancient eyes narrowing with barely veiled contempt. He leaned forward, folding his long, delicate fingers together as if savoring the tension in the room. Humanity's refusal is unexpected, Zurian said, his voice colder now, a subtle shift in his tone betraying his growing irritation. You are aware, I assume, that our offer is not one you can afford to refuse? Kayla's pulse quickened, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she kept her eyes locked on his. I'm aware, she replied, her voice steady. And we still refuse. Humanity does not bow to anyone, no matter how many stars they control. The murmurs in the room rose briefly, and Kayla felt a faint stir of pride. This wasn't just about diplomacy. It was about asserting their place in the galaxy, about standing up for the future of Earth. But she could already sense the shift. Zurian had been prepared for opposition, but not this level of defiance. We've seen how you humans operate, Captain, Zurian continued, his tone taking on a more patronizing edge. Your progress, your technology, it is impressive. But your arrogance is dangerous. This council governs hundreds of worlds, uniting diverse species under a single banner. You cannot afford to ignore that unity forever. Kayla clenched her jaw. We've done just fine on our own. We're not looking for a united galaxy, Chancellor. We're looking for freedom. A ripple of surprise passed through the council. Most of the species represented had never encountered a race that outright rejected the council's overtures. A few delegates exchanged whispers, while others sat motionless, perhaps assessing the consequences of this unprecedented act. I see, Zurian said, the faintest trace of a smirk tugging at his lips. Then I must inform you that there will be consequences for this refusal. The Council does not tolerate such insolence. You risk alienating your allies, and worse, you risk provoking those who see your independence as a threat. Let them, Kayla replied. We'll stand alone if we must. Earth is not a satellite of anyone. She knew the words were risky. Too risky, maybe. But they were true. Humanity had struggled through its own history, fighting wars, surviving natural disasters, and constantly battling for its place in the universe. She wasn't about to let Zurian's veiled threats intimidate her. This was about more than Earth's survival, It was about preserving what humanity had worked so hard to build, a future in which they didn't have to answer to anyone. Zurian's eyes flickered, his calm exterior cracking ever so slightly. He didn't like being challenged, especially not in front of the entire council. "Very well, Captain," he said, his voice colder now, carrying the weight of an ultimatum. "We will respect your decision for now. But understand this, there will be no more offers. No more patience. The galaxy does not operate in isolation, and the Council will not allow humanity to threaten the stability we've spent millennia building. Your independence is a dangerous illusion." Kayla leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "Then let the galaxy be dangerous, Chancellor. Humanity will face it, just as we always have." Zurian nodded slowly, his thin lips pressing together into a tight line. "So be it. The Council has spoken." With a sharp motion, he turned his gaze away, signaling the end of the session. The delegates stood as one, their movements deliberate, eyes lingering on Kayla with a mix of curiosity, disdain, and perhaps even fear. As the holographic projection of Zurian flickered off, Kayla exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle in her chest. The room was quiet now, the only sound the soft hum of the ship's engines vibrating through the floor. She turned to face her team, Earth's representatives, a mix of military officials, politicians, and diplomats. They stood in silence, some of them unsure, others resolute. "We've done it," one of them murmured, a hint of awe in his voice. "We've rejected them." Kayla's face hardened. "This is only the beginning," she said, her voice low, her gaze steady. "We've made our choice. Now we'll see what the galaxy does about it." As she stepped out of the chamber, the door sliding shut behind her with a soft whoosh, Kayla felt the weight of the decision settle over her. The stakes were higher than ever, and the repercussions were inevitable. But humanity had made its stand, and she would make sure that stand was not forgotten. The first few days after the rejection felt almost surreal. Earth's message had been sent across the galaxy: "We will not bow to the Galactic Council." Kayla had expected repercussions, but the full force of what came next was far more insidious than she'd anticipated. It started with the subtle things. A few key trade routes, vital to Earth's colonies, were suddenly closed or rerouted without explanation. Diplomatic communications with other species became slow, almost non-existent. Earth's allies, those who had once spoken of shared goals, were silent. The lines of communication that once hummed with promise were now eerily quiet, as if they, too, had been warned by the Council. Then came the sanctions. Kayla sat at her desk in the embassy on the human-dominated colony of Nova Luna, her eyes flickering over the latest report. The Sindraki were blocking shipments of essential supplies to Earth, everything from foodstuffs to advanced technology. The Council's shadowy influence was everywhere, tightening around the human colonies, slowly but steadily. "Captain Hayes," a voice broke through her thoughts. Lieutenant Alina Tran stepped into the room, her face as tight as Kayla's had ever seen it. "I've got a situation in the colony market sector. We're getting reports of riots." Kayla's brow furrowed. "Riots? Yeah. The Sindraki embargo just went into effect, and people are panicking. Food prices are doubling. The black market is flourishing." "Damn it," Kayla muttered, pinching the bridge of her nose. She'd known this was coming, but seeing it unfold so quickly hit harder than she had expected. The people didn't deserve this. They'd done nothing wrong. Still, it wasn't the time to lose control. "Have you got anyone calming things down?" she asked, standing up and adjusting her jacket. "Some, but not enough. We're stretched thin. The colonies are starting to feel the pressure." Kayla clenched her jaw. "Send a full detachment to the market. No more skirmishes. We need to maintain order without escalating it. Let the civilians know that we won't let them go hungry, but that they'll have to respect the law." Alina nodded and turned to leave, but stopped at the door. "Captain, there's more. The political leaders back on Earth are divided. Some are calling for compromise. They want us to apologize to the Council, to smooth things over before this gets worse. They're not happy with the way we're handling things here. Kayla's heart sank. She had expected this too, but hearing it from her own team made it more real. It was the last thing she needed right now, doubt. They don't understand, Kayla muttered. This isn't about ego. This is about survival. If we give in now, they'll walk all over us. If we don't show them we can stand our ground, this won't end. Not just with the Council, but with every power that comes after us. Alina said nothing but nodded and walked out, leaving Kayla alone in her thoughts. The Council's strategy was becoming clear now. They weren't going to retaliate openly, not yet. Instead, they were tightening their grip, hoping to break humanity's will through subtle pressure, economic strangulation, and division. They were forcing Earth into a corner, daring Kayla to give in, to make the first move. They were waiting for humanity to panic. But Kayla wasn't ready to give them that satisfaction. She stood from her desk, moving over to the large viewport that looked out over the colony's busy street. The bustling crowds were now a chaotic mix of fear and uncertainty. She could almost hear the whispers of rebellion rising up, murmuring through the wind. The people were starting to feel it, the slow, insidious change in their daily lives. Her communicator buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. "Captain Hayes," came the voice of her senior advisor, Lucian Cortez. "We've just received another transmission from the Council." Kayla gritted her teeth. "I assume it's more of the same?" "It's more urgent this time. They're calling for a summit. They want to resolve the situation." Kayla's mind raced. A summit? The last thing she wanted was to sit across from Zurian again, with a smile on his face and a dagger in his hand. They weren't offering peace. They were offering submission. "Not happening," Kayla said firmly. "Send them a response. Tell them Earth won't attend any meeting under duress. Not until they lift the sanctions and stop this embargo." "Understood." She paused, letting the silence settle. There was no easy way out of this. No matter what path she chose, the road ahead would only get rougher. The problem was bigger than just her, bigger than just Nova Luna. The stakes were galactic now. The Sindraki were playing a dangerous game, one in which the slightest misstep could unravel everything. Kayla glanced at her reflection in the window, her face pale in the dim light. She didn't have the luxury of doubt, not now. Not when humanity's future hung by a thread. The Council's moves were calculated, methodical. Everything they did had a purpose. She had to match them, outthink them, or Earth would be lost to their bureaucratic stranglehold. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Lucian again, his face lined with stress. "There's something else, Captain." "Speak." "It's the fleets," he said, lowering his voice. "We've detected Sindraki ships moving closer to our border." "Not far off, Captain. If we don't act fast, we might be facing a blockade." Kayla's pulse quickened. The Sindraki weren't playing games anymore. They were escalating, pushing Earth closer to a breaking point. If they managed a full blockade, it would cripple humanity's economy, and worse, it would be a declaration of war. "They want us to flinch," Kayla said, more to herself than to Lucian. "They think they can break us by starving us out. That's what this is, economic warfare." "What do you want to do?" Lucian asked, his voice steady but with an undercurrent of urgency. Kayla didn't hesitate. "We're not backing down. Send word to the military. We need to mobilize the fleet, prepare for defense. I won't let them push us into a corner." Lucian nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. "And the Council? They're not calling the shots anymore," Kayla said coldly. "We are." Lucian left to carry out her orders, and Kayla stood alone in the room once more, her thoughts swirling. The storm was coming. The question wasn't whether it would hit, it was whether humanity would survive it. The answer, she knew, rested entirely on her shoulders. Kayla sat at the bridge of the Resolute, her fingers tapping nervously on the console in front of her. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. The Sindraki fleet was closing in, and her orders were clear: prepare for battle. Her ship, the flagship of Earth's military force in the outer colonies, was already on high alert, her crew primed for what was to come. The enemy fleet was still a few hours out, but their presence had been detected, and their movement was unmistakable. They were testing Earth's resolve. Lucian Cortez stood next to her, his face grim, eyes scanning the fleet's data on the console. He had been with Kayla since the beginning of this crisis, and she knew that the weight of this decision was heavy for him, too. They'd both fought for this, fought for Earth's future. And now, they were fighting not just against the Sindraki, but against the growing doubt within their own ranks. A war was not just on the horizon, it was barreling toward them. "Status report," Kayla said, her voice low, her tone clipped. Lucian turned to her, his voice tight with urgency. "Sindraki ships are aligning for a potential blockade. They've deployed several advance patrols. The Resolute is ready for combat, but the rest of the fleet isn't fully mobilized yet. We're spread thin." Kayla's eyes narrowed. They had hoped to avoid a full-scale war, but the Council's decision to mobilize their fleet left them with little choice. "How much time do we have before they reach the blockade line?" 30 minutes at most." A sharp silence filled the room. Kayla could feel the weight of the moment pressing in on her, suffocating her chest. She had never thought it would come to this, but now it was inevitable. Earth's refusal to bow had triggered the storm, and it was coming with a fury. "We need to buy time," she muttered to herself. Lucian's gaze softened, but only for a moment. "We're going to need more than time, Captain. We need strategy." She nodded. "Prepare the secondary fleet for evasive maneuvers. I don't want them to see us as an easy target. We'll create a diversion and lead them into the asteroid belt. If they want to chase us, they'll have to navigate through the debris. It'll slow them down." "A dangerous maneuver," Lucian said, arching an eyebrow. "If the Sindraki are as advanced as we think, they won't fall for it." "They'll have no choice," Kayla replied firmly. "We need them to hesitate, to doubt. The moment we show weakness, we'll lose. Make it happen." Lucian turned to the tactical officer, who had been listening quietly from his station. "Get the secondary fleet moving. Now." A flurry of commands rang out across the bridge as the officers scrambled to execute the plan. Kayla's eyes remained fixed on the view screen, watching as the distant stars twinkled, oblivious to the conflict unfolding just beyond their gaze. The calm before the storm. But that storm was coming fast. The Sindraki fleet's presence loomed like a shadow on the horizon. Every ship that entered Earth's space now carried the weight of the Council's wrath. And Kayla knew that no matter what they did, they couldn't outrun it forever. "Captain," a voice crackled from the comms. It was Alina, her voice tight with urgency. "We've got a problem on Nova Luna. The riots have escalated again. People are starting to arm themselves. We've got reports of civilians attacking military outposts." "Damn it," Kayla hissed. She could hear the stress in Alina's voice, but there was little time for anything but the immediate threat in front of them. "I need you to keep them under control, Alina. Use whatever force is necessary to stop the violence, but do not engage in a civil war. We can't afford that now." "I understand, Captain," Alina responded, but her voice was tinged with frustration. "But the situation's spiraling out of control. I'll keep you posted." Kayla disconnected the call, feeling the weight of the dual crisis bearing down on her. It was one thing to defend against the Sindraki, it was another entirely to manage the unrest on Earth itself. A civil conflict would weaken humanity's ability to stand against the Council. And yet, that was the least of her worries. If the Sindraki could lock down Earth's supply lines, if they could cripple the colonies, the riots would be nothing compared to the consequences that would follow. Lucian returned to her side, his expression grim. "We've got word from Earth. The politicians are making noise. They want to negotiate. They're still holding out hope for a peaceful resolution." Kayla clenched her jaw. The negotiations were already over. Earth had made its decision. Tell them to stand firm. We don't negotiate with anyone who's trying to destroy us. Understood. Lucien turned to leave, but Kayla stopped him with a hand. Lucien, how long until we can execute the diversion plan? He glanced back at her, meeting her gaze with a hardened resolve. It's ready. Just give the order. Kayla took a deep breath. Her fingers hovered over the command console, and for a moment she hesitated. There was no going back from this. The moment she issued the order, the war would officially begin. But the alternative, allowing the Sindraki to bully Earth into submission, was unacceptable. She had to act. For Earth. For humanity's future. Execute the plan, Kayla said, her voice steady, though her heart pounded in her chest. Lucien nodded. Aye, Captain. Diverting the fleet now. The Resolute rumbled beneath her feet as the crew executed the maneuver. Outside, the stars began to blur as they made their way into the asteroid belt. Kayla's fingers tightened on the armrest of her chair as she watched the Sindraki fleet pursue. They had taken the bait. Now it was a race against time. As they entered the belt, the asteroid field became a chaotic maze of rock and debris, the perfect trap to slow down the Sindraki. But it was also a deadly gamble. If the Sindraki didn't fall for the trap, or if they pushed through the debris too quickly, Kayla would have nothing left to bargain with. Hold tight, Kayla whispered to herself. This is it. The asteroid belt closed in around them, a chaotic storm of space debris. The Resolute weaved between massive chunks of rock, the fleet following suit. In the distance, she could see the glint of the Sindraki ships, their pursuit unwavering. But the question remained, would the gamble pay off? Or was Earth about to face the full fury of the Council? The asteroid field swirled around Kayla like a hurricane in space. Jagged rock formations loomed like silent sentinels, a massive wall of debris blocking their path. The Resolute was maneuvering with precision, but the odds were growing slim. The Sindraki fleet was far too organized, and their pursuit had become more calculated with every passing minute. Kayla stood at the helm, eyes locked on the viewscreen. The Sindraki ships were still behind them, closing in faster than she had anticipated. Their advanced technology had allowed them to slice through the belt with ease, bypassing the natural obstacles that were slowing the humans down. They're not slowing down, Lucien said, his voice tight as he watched the scanners. They've adjusted course. They know what we're trying to do. Kayla exhaled sharply. I know. But we have to keep going. We can't let them break through. Not yet. Captain, the tactical officer spoke up from behind her. We've lost contact with the secondary fleet. Their signals are being jammed. Kayla's stomach churned. She had known the risks, but the cold reality hit her harder than she had expected. They were losing ground. We can't hold them off much longer, Captain, Lucien warned. We've got no more tricks to play. If they catch up, it's over. Kayla clenched her fists. She had always known this moment would come, but it had never felt so imminent. The Sindraki weren't playing by any rules. They had too much at stake, and their patience was wearing thin. Their fleet was relentless. They had the manpower, the technology, and the sheer drive to crush humanity's resistance. We need to make a decision, Lucien pressed, his eyes darting between the data and Kayla. We can't keep running forever. If we don't stand and fight, they'll destroy us. The tension in Kayla's chest tightened, her mind working in overdrive. She had played this scenario out countless times in her mind, but now that it was real, it felt different. She had trained for this, prepared for it, but nothing could have prepared her for the weight of the situation. She had to make a call. They're not giving us an option, Kayla said, her voice firm, but tinged with a steel resolve. We fight. Lucien's eyes met hers, and for the briefest of moments, she saw the same decision mirrored in his expression. He understood. The moment they fired back, there would be no turning back. Earth would be at war, and they couldn't afford to lose. Prepare all weapons, she barked, turning toward the communications officer. Get the fleet in position. We fight or die today. There's no middle ground. The officers scrambled to execute her orders, and Kayla's pulse quickened. The Sindraki ships were still advancing, their relentless pursuit showing no signs of stopping. Their fleet was powerful, and they had the firepower to crush anything in their path. But Kayla had a secret weapon, something the Sindraki weren't expecting. Earth's fleet was smaller, but they had something the Sindraki didn't: unpredictability. "We'll make them regret underestimating us," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. Seconds felt like hours as the Resolute danced through the asteroid field, weaving between massive chunks of rock. Every turn brought them closer to the enemy fleet, and Kayla's mind raced. There had to be a way to turn the tide in their favor. There had to be. Then, a breakthrough. A sudden message pinged from Earth's military command. Kayla's heart skipped as she read the transmission. "Captain Hayes," Lucian said, his voice full of surprise. "It's a rally signal. Earth's sending reinforcements. They're deploying everything they've got to assist." Her pulse surged with a mixture of relief and renewed determination. Earth wasn't giving up on them. The reinforcements might be their only chance to survive, but they couldn't wait around for them to arrive. They had to hold the line until backup arrived. "Good," Kayla said, setting her jaw. "Prepare to engage at full firepower. We're making our stand now." The bridge came alive as crew members activated the weapons systems. Outside, the Sindraki fleet was almost upon them, their guns charged and ready to unleash hell. The first few shots from the enemy cracked the silence of space, their energy blasts barely missing the Resolute as it dodged and retaliated with its own fire. The asteroid field, once a protective maze, now became a dangerous battleground, with ships darting between rocks and debris, narrowly avoiding collisions. "All systems online, Captain. We're ready to engage," the weapons officer reported. "Then let's make them regret chasing us," Kayla replied, her eyes sharp and cold. The Resolute fired first, its weapons cutting through the void like a wolf's bite. The Sindraki retaliated almost instantly, their ship's shields absorbing the energy blasts with ease. Kayla's teeth clenched. She had known this would be a brutal fight, but the sheer scale of the Sindraki's firepower was terrifying. Still, humanity's resolve was unshaken. "Captain," Lucian's voice cut through her thoughts, urgency in his tone. "We're losing them. They're flanking us from the right." Kayla cursed under her breath. She had no illusions. This wasn't just a battle of ships, it was a battle of wills. The Sindraki were testing humanity, probing its limit. If they broke here, Earth's resistance would crumble. There would be no chance for peace, no chance for diplomacy. "Bring the left flank around," she ordered. "Don't give them an inch." As the Resolute veered into another sharp turn, Kayla's hand hovered over the controls, every fiber of her being focused on the incoming threat. The Sindraki were relentless, but so were they. The comms officer interrupted her thoughts. "Captain, incoming transmission. It's from Nova Luna." "Patch it through," Kayla ordered, not looking away from the view screen. The face of Lieutenant Alina Tran appeared on the screen, her eyes wide with panic. "Captain, the riots on Nova Luna. They've gone from bad to worse. We can't control them. Civilians are fighting back with weapons. Military outposts are being overrun. We need reinforcements, now." Kayla's chest tightened, but she held her composure. She couldn't afford to divide her focus. "I'm sending a message to the fleet. I need you to hold the line, Alina. We can't lose Nova Luna. Earth is counting on us." Alina nodded, but Kayla could see the worry in her eyes. They were running out of time. The Sindraki fleet was closing in, and the rebellion on Nova Luna was spiraling out of control. Kayla's mind raced, but there was nothing more she could do now. She had to fight. Fight for Earth, fight for the colonies, and fight for humanity's future. Engage full weapon systems. Hold nothing back, Kayla commanded again, as her hands gripped the controls with unyielding determination. Outside, the battle raged on. The storm had arrived, and there was no turning back. The battle outside the Resolute was chaos incarnate. The asteroid field had become a graveyard of shattered ships and burning debris, the cold vacuum of space turning the shattered pieces into tombstones for those unlucky enough to be caught in the crossfire. The Sindraki fleet, relentless and powerful, pressed on with a fury that seemed impossible to match. But Kayla wouldn't back down. Not now, not ever. Shields at 60%, Captain. Lucien's voice came from the tactical console. They're pushing us hard. We're running out of time. Kayla's knuckles turned white on the command chair. She had never imagined it would come to this, an all-out war with humanity's future hanging in the balance. The Resolute had been their strongest weapon, their symbol of resistance, but even it was starting to feel like a sinking ship. The enemy was too strong, and the reinforcements Earth had promised had not yet arrived. Deploy the heavy cannons. All batteries, open fire on their lead ship, Kayla barked. Her voice was firm, but her heart pounded in her chest. This was a gamble, a desperate attempt to slow the Sindraki down long enough for Earth's reinforcements to break through. The Resolute rocked as its weapons systems fired in a synchronized barrage. For a brief moment, the asteroid field glowed with the flash of energy, the deadly light cutting through the darkness of space. The lead Sindraki ship was struck, its shields buckling under the intensity of the blast. We've hit their forward shields, Captain. They're starting to lose formation, the weapons officer reported. Kayla's eyes narrowed as she tracked the incoming threat. It was a small victory, but it wouldn't be enough to turn the tide. Not yet. Captain. Lucien's voice shot through the tension. Incoming transmission from Earth's fleet. Reinforcements are en route. ETA 20 minutes. Kayla's breath caught in her throat. 20 minutes. It was a small window, but it was all they had. She couldn't afford to waste a single second. Focus all fire on their rear ship. We need to buy time, she commanded, gripping the edge of her seat. If we don't get a break in the next 20 minutes, we'll be destroyed. The Resolute lurched again as another volley from the Sindraki hit its shield. They were pushing, relentless, trying to break them before help could arrive. But Kayla wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. Not when Earth's survival was on the line. Captain. A voice broke through the noise of the bridge. It was the comms officer, her face pale and tense. We've just received a coded message from Nova Luna. The situation there is deteriorating. The riots have become a full-blown insurgency. If we don't get control soon, the colony will fall. Kayla felt the weight of the world crashing down on her. 2 battles now, one in space, one on the surface, and she had no way of winning both. Alina, listen to me, Kayla said, her voice calm but urgent as she transmitted a message to the surface. You have to hold out no matter what. The reinforcements will arrive soon, but you need to secure the military installations. We cannot let them take Nova Luna. Earth's future is tied to that colony. Alina's voice crackled through the comms, heavy with the weight of defeat. We're doing everything we can, Captain. But the civilians are armed and they're not backing down. I don't know how long we can hold them off. The Sindraki are going to use this to their advantage. I know, Kayla replied, eyes steely with determination. Just hold. Reinforcements are coming. You've got this. She cut the transmission and turned to Lucien, who was staring at the screen, his face grim. It's not enough, he said, almost to himself. We don't have the manpower. We're fighting a losing battle. No, Kayla snapped, the fire in her voice unmistakable. We're not losing. Not yet. The Resolute shuddered as more explosions rocked the ship. They were closer now, so close that Kayla could almost feel the weight of the Sindraki's presence pressing down on her. Their weapons were too strong, their tactics too refined. But still, they hadn't broken through. Captain, Lucien said, his voice edged with something Kayla hadn't expected, fear. I don't think we can survive much longer. The Sindraki are, they're too much. We need to consider retreating. Kayla's gaze shot toward him. Retreat? You want to run? I'm saying we're out of options, he said, his voice cracking slightly. Earth's fleet is still far from us. The Sindraki are almost through our defenses. If we don't pull back, we'll be destroyed. Kayla shook her head, eyes flashing with defiance. No. We'll fight until the last shot. This is what we stand for, Lucian. Earth's last hope. I won't back down now. Lucian looked as though he was going to argue, but the words died on his lips. He understood. They all understood. Retreat wasn't an option. Not now. Not after everything. Another round of cannon fire hit the Resolute, and the ship lurched forward. The hull groaned under the assault. She could feel it, the slow, inevitable damage, the weakening of their defenses. But something inside her refused to let the terror take over. They weren't out of options yet. Captain. The tactical officer's voice cut through the tension. Sindraki ships are entering the asteroid field at full speed. They're cutting off our escape route. Kayla's breath caught in her chest. They were trapped. Her mind raced as she searched for a solution. There had to be something. Then, a fleeting thought crossed her mind. It was risky, it was insane, but it might just work. Engage emergency thrusters, Kayla commanded, her voice cold and resolute. Give me a direct course into the heart of the Sindraki fleet. Lucian whipped around, eyes wide in shock. You're not serious, are you? Captain, we'll be destroyed. Maybe, Kayla said, her gaze locked on the screen. But if we go down fighting. Full power to forward shields. Fire all remaining weapons. Let's give them hell. The Resolute surged forward, engines burning hot as it rocketed toward the enemy fleet. The Sindraki ships, too focused on their pursuit, didn't immediately react. Kayla's hands were steady on the controls as the Resolute plowed forward, aiming for the heart of the Sindraki formation. The Resolute's weapons unleashed one final barrage, slicing through the Sindraki formation in a blaze of light. The impact was enough to shake the Sindraki ships, their shields flickering under the intensity of the strike. We're doing it, Lucian said, his voice filled with awe. Not yet, Kayla whispered, watching the chaos unfold. The Sindraki had no idea what was coming next. As the ship tore through the battlefield, Kayla clung to one truth. They weren't done yet. No matter the odds, no matter the cost, humanity would stand its ground.